Chair Hamilton, you're free to begin.
Thank you. Apologies for not being able to be there live, but appreciate everyone gathering. Good afternoon. Today is Monday, July 18th, and this is a time and place for the scheduled Esports Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Deputy Chief Marusic, has our agenda been posted in accordance with the open meeting law?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. Today we'll be covering all items noted on our agenda. Deputy Chief Marusic, let's proceed with public comments.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on ETAC related matters.
Anyone wishing to make a public comment, please step forward to the podium. We're good?
Appear to be any public comment.
Thank you. That will close our public comment section. Deputy Chief Marusic, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the prior meeting's disposition and meeting minutes.
Pursuant to NRS 241-035, this item is the consideration of the approval of Esports Technical Advisory Committee disposition and minutes for March 1st, 2022.
Thank you. Each of us has had the opportunity to review the dispositions and workshop meeting minutes. Would any of my colleagues care to make a motion?
Seth Shore for the record, and make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes and the disposition of minutes for March 1st, 2022 are approved. Deputy Chief Marusic, I believe that brings us to agenda item number 3. Please read in item number 3.
Item number 3 is the presentation of Moritz Maurer, CEO of Grid, on multiple issues relating to official data and its use as a wagering product in esports competitions.
Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Moritz Maurer. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
This is when I start my presentation. Okay, thank you. I'll introduce myself briefly to give everybody a bit of context on the reason we're here and the subject we're going to speak about. The presentation is on the extraction, processing, and distribution of official data and the role it plays in an esports wagering ecosystem. As I said, I'd like to start to give a bit of context on myself, my career, and perspective I bring to the ETAC today. My first company, roughly 11 years ago, was already at the intersection of esports betting and data. It got awarded the first UK Gambling Commission license for wagering on esports at a time when the whole subject was a lot more novel than it is now. To the listeners and the group present here, ultimately recognized that with the startup, I was not my passion and the competency of this business was so much on the operator side, but more on the supply and data side. So I pivoted to B2B and subsequently sold this company to Genius Sports, you might know, a large listed sports data supplier, also very active in the US. And during this time, I had the opportunity to learn from the sports data space, the sports data licensing model, and understand the implications of data in a traditional sports context and emulate these models and concepts for bringing esports wagering in the regulated market into the arena, and did so also during that company. During that time, the challenges were very much around, well, trying to work with a static framework for data in traditional sports and trying to tackle a challenge in a esports sector that is very fragmented, very multifaceted, and has an ever-changing nature because of how computer games work, and also recognizing the entities that play a role in the data value chain. Having spent my time there, also had the opportunity to tackle a lot of integrity challenges in a general betting context, but also some that were very much specific to esports and how it's operated as a sport and structured. So having left this position, ultimately, I set out to create Grid, company I'm talking about today, and explain our model and our vision for the role of official data for esports and how its potential can be unlocked. So that wagering is ultimately a source of engagement and revenue and a benefactor for the sport, the ecosystem, and its stakeholders as a whole. And so I'm very humbled and thankful to have the opportunity to share my thoughts and our perspective here today. Because given the career, you can probably understand it's something I'm passionate about and care about a lot. So that's a great honor. I will see if I can work out the hardware here. Yeah. Good. Jumping into the presentation. Following my lengthy introduction, the creation, distribution, and use of official data wagering on esports competitions. Just testing the device. Oh, wait, maybe I hit the wrong button. No. Oh, okay. Good. So our data platform is not mechanical turking any of our solutions, by the way. I'll jump into speaking about the ecosystem as a whole. Esports is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of sporting activities. Just before jumping into the wagering ecosystem, the wagering data value chain, I just want to outline for the audience all the facets of a sport that you know in traditional sports, from broadcasting, advertising, professional teams and organizations, and all the kind of sponsorships and adjacent verticals you have in esports. These are well-established industries. Esports is, as part of gaming, part of the largest entertainment vertical in the world. By revenue, gaming is larger than movies and music combined. So from the time I started to now, we're speaking about a completely different landscape here. What we're discussing today is great because I think it's an opportunity for the sport really to emulate, where applicable, successful structures for regulation, but also do it in a way that embraces its unique nature and the facets that define the sport. So thinking about a vast ecosystem, one thing that it really is a unique, in a way, delineation from traditional sports is that it's all data-based, and data plays a way larger role. This is given, in fact, due to the digital nature of the sport itself, but in almost all the industries and adjacent markets to esports, I can draw a line that is kind of implying a connection that is data-driven or data-reliant in one way or another. And it's an aspect, given that it's a digital sport, that is very worthwhile to embracing when you want to do things in the best possible way. Thank you. So in traditional sports, even after like almost a decade of quite advanced leaps in the development of new technologies for data dissemination and general advances in the technology that that has improved the data resolution in sports, the status quo is still not comparable where we are in esports, like basically on day one, because there is a perfect source of data. It's a digital sport as a game server where I have a definitely true reflection of what is going on in an event. I'm never limited by a field of view. The data is not collected in an ideal way, in an official data way, with any manual input, which removes a man-made error potential. So that already is a great starting point. Then the sport itself is the intellectual property of the game developers, the game publisher. This position of a rights holder doesn't find its counterpart in sport. The leagues are also rights holders, of course, but I don't have to sign a user license agreement before I throw football around. But I have to for play a game. And it's very important to recognize the super rights holder position because it impacts the governance in esports massively. And lastly, I mentioned the quality of the data is actually allowing for a data value chain that sports is still thriving to achieve, I think, in many places, where the visibility over like developments in a game that can be recorded or tracked by data is very high. We think it's the key on both the integrity side, but also the user experience, but also from a regulatory front, it's where to answer a lot of questions that are answered to a good extent in traditional sports, but in esports could be answered even better because we have that robust, that one true source of information. Having spoken about the ecosystem, outlined it like the betting data value chain, what role has official data in this ecosystem? We look at a lot of areas. What you see are clustered around the grid bubble is like the kind of industries we're serving already today with data solutions that are officially licensed, that come directly from the game. Integrity solutions are very data hungry by nature. Storytelling is important, broadcast innovation too. We speak about a sport here that is quite complex compared to most traditional sports. So really, for the accessibility, this is for the viewer in general, but also for the punter to drive informed decision making. There's a lot you can do with statistics to break these barriers down that still exist there. And from an operator standpoint, speaking about offering something that is arguably still exotic, this is an area where we're investing a lot together with our customers to provide ultimate coaching, talent scouting, and careers. Is a lot of things that result more on the grassroots level, on building a sustainable foundation for sport. So the pinnacle of it is viable, is eligible for wagering or in a sports wagering context, as we think about it for the NFL or the NBA. Media, of course, betting as an engagement driver is very closely connected. Post-Passport repeal. Reality in America is a great example. As a European, you're a bit of a spectator to this, but seeing how wagering finds its way into media, into a viewing experience, into how sport is commented is a very big deal and a big opportunity. And then obviously providing fantasy and betting operator with data, with solutions that allow them to have a good offering is at the core. And at the same time, making data available to the community, to scholastic bodies, is just something our platform does from a more philosophy or conviction standpoint of opening up the ecosystem. So obviously I'm a bit biased here, but I think data is very much at the center of a lot of the things we're trying to do here and we're speaking about today. Next slide. Yeah. So very briefly about this company I just mentioned. So Grid is the creator of the Grid data platform. We work with rights holders in esports and in gaming. And it's a bunch of group of a bunch of people who have a lot of expertise in gaming and esports and wagering industry, and they're really embracing, especially the role of the rights holder in its business model, but also the role of the data that is perfect and pristine and directly from the source and how we build our technology. We're headquartered in Berlin, in Germany, and have 80+ staff distributed around the globe. The company was founded in 2018. And as I said before, this is just to outline a few of our partners that are trusting our platform already. So a predominant share of rights holders, be tournament organizers or game developers work with us. And we ultimately cover a large share of the addressable market for official data, especially in a wagering context in the world right now. And we only work with official data events. There's many other ways to get data, and I will quickly speak about this in a bit. But we work with the conviction and a very skin in the game approach to only work with the source in an official direct partnership with a rights holder and help them to unlock the value of their data for their ecosystem in general. And now speaking a bit about our technology, to keep it very top level here, we can break down the core things that are happening on Grid's platform in layers. So there's an extraction layer. It's all about getting data in. This is either us deploying technology onto game servers or game engine to extract data, or receiving APIs, and then normalizing data inputs towards a processing framework that we build in a very game title agnostic way. And then we distribute data in different modules or packages and ultimately serve a wide array of different groups or data use cases with tailored solution. For example, for wagering, this means data via an API, visualizations, prediction and odds feeds on top, customer-facing streaming and widgets. For a coaching solution, the post-match aspects and analysis of data and deeper building of KPIs is a lot more important. And for the broadcast innovation, the live contextualization to create interesting insights, for example, is more where the focus lies in what we do. That ultimately is what it means to be a platform in a data capacity in a sport or esports in general. And a concept I quickly just want to introduce, because there's also some merit to it when you think about esports in this very multifaceted thing that it is from a regulatory standpoint. One big learning I had being at a traditional sports data player was it is very hard to cater to a sport, technologically build things in a way that don't result in huge dependency on specific game titles, especially if game titles come and go out of fashion and develop all the time. So building in a game title agnostic way is one of the key benefits for our customers. Makes it very easy to cross-pollinate information from one innovation from one game title to another. It makes it very easy to integrate, and once you have one integration, to have a basic data scheme of grid data in your system, covering additional game titles is very easy. And that also returns obviously benefits for the rights holders on a platform, which mean they plug into a system that is more unified. And key here, what we're aiming towards is more scalability, because we still speak about esports here as a whole. These are different sports, many actually, and played in different genres, played on different platforms with very different cultural and regional preferences. And obviously, we were looking to govern it as one, but there's intricacies that have to be taken into consideration. My conviction is, at least, or the vision of a company is to, at least on a data level, facilitate this part of the challenge. And yeah, some example of what this can look like. I said before, years of advancements in data collection technology in sport, but you still don't have that kind of detailed real-time movements and actions of players. You're never limited by a field of view. No one can be obscured because everything is happening on the data. There's no manual match state entry used on the extraction side, which means there's also no potential for human error. We don't have to correct our data after the fact. And we never, like, esports data is in a way omnipotent, if you think about it. Like, we never have to sacrifice granularity for data speed because of just the throughput that one human can do who's sitting at the court side collecting data. So that is always good to keep into consideration, because this is the case for official data. This is what we're speaking about. It's what our platform revolves around. There's many other sources of data, like people scrape YouTube or Twitch broadcasts or manually collecting data. And none of the innovation that requires this level of resolution is obviously possible in these cases. So why is it so important? This is the second part. Now we're speaking more about really from a rights holder, from a regulatory perspective. On the left side, official data, just summarizing some of the characteristics I highlighted before. There is a super rights holder, there's the owner of the sport. From a governance standpoint, I like to say, if you're having a discussion about esports and the game developers aren't in the room, you might as well not talk about it, because there's a literal IP owner of the game you're speaking about, and many are making great efforts already to regulate and to introduce rules and to sanction competitions. And one concept that is important here, and that I can see in the partnerships that we do, if there is an official data license available, if there's an official data asset pronounced or created through a partnership with a game developer, it implies a certain intent. Wagering is part of the engagement channels or an activity that is allowed and even endorsed and wanted in their ecosystem. So generally following this line allows us to make sure that the offering on the operator side is congruent with what on the rights holder side is deemed eligible, is deemed viable for betting coverage or exploitation. And sticking to this concept and basically using, in a way, the availability of official data as a guideline here is a very good way of making sure that these two incentives are aligned. An example for basically the the data you have in the official data as like stock exchange information. It's centralized, it's real, there's a source of truth. And if you compare this to like optical character recognition in esports would be a price comparison website. There's many providers. The data has different levels of accuracy or update speeds, and it's not real and it can't be verified or certified in a way. So again, with unofficial data, I mentioned all of the shortcomings there, but this is not just from a business model and value chain perspective, but also very much from a product perspective. In a digital sport, why settle for something so inferior? Is kind of where I'm coming from on this. Yeah, and at Grid, we have basically 3 guiding principles on the data, which is, you can see at the bottom. We think if official data is at the center of what you do, the integrity of the match, the integrity of the source, and the integrity of the bet is catered to. This means match fixing, identification, prevention, and monitoring is catered to. The event that you're offering is part of a catalog that is designed to be wagered on. The data is accurate, the odds are going to be correct, and information available to the customer, the speed at which they receive results, and the insights they are being presented with before they make an informed decision are all based on proper information and data. And all of these levels matter in getting it right across the whole value chain, I think. Thanks. So within our, as I said, as a big unofficial data industry in esports, but thinking about the part of the ecosystem we cater to, again, with some of the largest partners on our platform already and trusting in this approach, we put the rights holder first and at the center. This whole chain of command basically sees as a mandate and license for the commercialization of official data for introducing wagering, but in the right way, with integrity at the core. And obviously, there's also a technology component that we cater to that is good. Like we have, I don't know, many years in understanding what kind of data feed has to be developed to cater to betting successfully. It's a different use case than making any data available to 100 million players. It means making perfect data with 60 updates per second available for a limited amount of matches. So it's a completely different challenge to tackle. From a data platform perspective in general, betting is incredibly mission critical use case. Because if you screw up, your clients are definitely directly paying for it, and then indirectly yourself most likely. So you want to get it right. So it means having a data feed that is suitable and scalable for in a wagering context means it's usually quite a robust data solution. And that is obviously the type of expertise we then bring to the table from a technological standpoint with game developer partnerships especially. And as a supplier of official data, these are being licensed, packaged in the different layers and modules I mentioned earlier. Then the data consumers, which is also something that's very important, they want to be part of the ecosystem. They're also ready to pay for the superior product I outlined earlier. This applies to bookmakers, but also any of the other use cases I mentioned in the introduction. You want to be part of official sanctioned esports. You want to be aligned with the ecosystem and a part of it. So that kind of accreditation comes with building on top of official data. In the betting context, I think it's absolutely vital because of the layers I mentioned earlier that come on top of just potentially superior product quality. And so getting to the close here, again, thanks for the opportunity. Given with this context I've just given, as Grid, there's 2 things we'd like to, it's 1 and 2. I don't know what happened there to numbering. As Grid, there's 2 things we'd like to propose or recommend to the Esports Technical Advisory Committee of the Nevada Gaming Control Board when it comes to the role of data in the regulation. One is mandating the use of official data assets for any feeds or products that are used in a wagering context. For all the reasons I outlined before, quality, protection of the consumer, and introduction of the rights holder into the supply chain, into the value chain. And number 2, this is more from a whitelisting and licensing competitions. I'm aware of the mechanism existing currently in Nevada. Doesn't really correspond well with the nature of esports in its current state, which is a very short notice nature of scheduling events. So generally, basically from a whitelisting perspective, if professional esports competitions that have the availability of a official data solution, if they are automatically included in the portfolio of competitions that are legal for wagering, basically this is a way to overcome this challenge, I think, and have a more scalable system in place that doesn't sacrifice any of the other objectives on the regulatory front, I think, for being instated in that way. And I think that concludes my presentation already. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. Do any of the committee members have any questions or comments?
Okay.
Seth Shore for the record. Where are you going, Moritz?
I didn't know there's a question portion. I didn't see if it was on the agenda, Christian.
I want to commend you on your commitment over the past decade of providing tools that I do think will be very helpful in regulating esport wagers. You mentioned a few times professional esport matches. Do you feel that your software platform would allow regulators or operators to differentiate between a professional and an amateur match? Or in your experience, what do you see defining the difference between a professional and an amateur esport match?
So that's a really good question, because depending on the esport game type we look at, there's different really characteristics that could indicate how professional a match is. Are the players part of a team in the league that pays salaries? How large is the prize pool they are competing for? How well defined is the rule set in which they're competing? Generally, working closely with game publishers and developers, there are a few examples where the distinction is absolutely clear. So I would really rely on the game developers' intent and guidance here on what is best for offering. I will add a caveat to that answer. This applies to spectator sports betting. There are many other wagering types that could be suitable for other competitions. Here's more in the game of skill spectrum, but I don't think that would fall into the same kind of regulation we speak about today.
Seth Shore for the record. And one more question. In one of your early slides of the esports ecosystem, you had listed a number of tournament providers, tournament operators, Nerd Street, and recognized a few others. In your experience in this industry for over a decade, and in the context of creating a whitelist, how would you suggest determining what tournament operators should be on that whitelist versus others?
So that's a good question. And again, in esports, you always have to look a bit game by game. We have more than 70 tournament organizer partners on our platform. Looking at the game title, there's a concentration we can see. In Valve's titles, Valve, a game developer, taking a generally more indirect position in governing their esport. Just has a very open ecosystem, which allows for a lot of tournament organizers to exist and to flourish. In other game titles, the game developer takes a more stricter role. For the franchise leagues and Activision Blizzard's Call of Duty and Overwatch franchise are a good example here, where it's quite clear, like to what extent game developer is in charge, or tournament organizers become an indirect right holder or a bit more empowered in their position. Which competition ultimately should be part of the portfolio? I think if there is a game title that is offered where there's a precedent, where there's an understanding between all the stakeholders involved what it is, and then a competition where all the information from an integrity assessment standpoint, from a data quality standpoint, and generally where all of this is accounted for, I think it would slow probably the ecosystem down as every single TO is approved or every single event is approved. If a tournament operator has a precedent of operating a game and continues newly added events meet the same kind of agenda or same kind of characteristics that are defined, and then this would mean they only have to go for an application once. Generally, I think to facilitate things a lot, like as a data platform, we can do a lot of that preemptively, that type of assessment in because all the data related capacities impact the competition standing, the game developer sanctioning, the integrity monitoring and availability, which I'm speaking here for Grid. This can be any other data company, and this can be any other data integrity provider. Is this more like, is this part of that tournament or not? And that could be a good way to guide us. So I would leave this on the esports, on the sports side, to say so, rather than on the regulatory side.
Thank you.
Jay Chow for the record. Hey, Moritz. Just to clarify what you just said, so are you saying that we should be whitelisting at the TO level? So basically, if there's a TO that, based on your criteria you just mentioned, passes, is a part of your platform, has data integrity services, has the right titles, the right games, that any tournaments that they conduct with that title should be whitelisted. Is it?
I think if the game developer generally elects this TO and the license they are granted for operating their tournament includes the decree to offer wagering also on these games, then yes. So a TO where the game developer has sanctioned basically the competition, I think would definitely be viable. And then I think there's exceptions where certain TOs after a certain size and enough precedence can fulfill this role too. But I would stick with the guidelines as I outlined in my presentation.
One more question. You mentioned that you guys have a process in which you take game data across multiple games and then kind of convert it onto some sort of common template on your platform to process so that you can share the data insights in multiple ways. Can you speak to how that may or may not benefit the actual integrity monitoring of the data? I mean, how does that help, or does it not?
Oh, it does definitely. So on the integrity monitoring side, or generally speaking from an integrity challenge side, I think there's a monitoring strand and there's an education strand. So on the education stand, a lot, like there's initiatives or the rules of a tournament being proper. There's many like levels we can go through. On the monitoring side, this plays a huge role because generally the basic characteristics of a monitoring solution in a sports or an esports context mean a combination between three things usually. One is generally market trends as expressed by the odds or the lines that you have monitored across a plethora of bookmakers who offer an event. There's internal market intelligence, which refers to information provided by bookmakers that can indicate patterns of specific like worrying signups or a way higher than expected wagering activity on a specific event. All of these, if consolidated, can give you a good idea. This was just an outlier and it just happened, or it's part of a pattern, something that can indicate something else. And the last one is the underlying data feed. When does something happen in a game, especially for live wagering? That information being verified, being true, being time-stamped properly is incredibly helpful. So there's a true probability, there's a true expression of the market, of the supremacy of the contenders, and there's additional alerts and pieces of information, and they can all contribute to something that can assist in match-fixing investigation. It can't often 100% determine something is going on, but they provide a context, and anybody investigating this, be it on the game publisher or the rights holder side directly, and is very helpful. And again here, to keep things scalable and to keep systems scalable in a sport that's evolving all the time, already there we see huge benefits of a game title agnostic framework to facilitate this.
Thank you.
Robbie Forbes for the record. First, thanks for being here. I know you came a long way, so appreciate that. I'm going to oversimplify this, but a firm like Grid sort of sits between the publisher and the betting platform and provides various services, but at its root, it's like data processing, taking the raw data feed and delivering it to the platform in sort of readable, digestible packets. Is that sort of accurate?
As one of the things we do that's at the core.
And that service, what I just want to make sure I understand, is there a world where that processing layer could occur directly from a publisher to a betting platform, or is it always true that sort of a data processing layer needs to sit between that, just from your perspective?
I think knowing the reality of the market on the consumer, of the betting operator side, and leaving any technological advantages I mentioned, or leaving all of that aside, similar like you have in sport, a kind of an arm's length principle introduced between the rights holder. And all the reasons we have this at arm's length principle in sport are kind of amplified because the game publishers, well, esports is one thing, they're predominantly monetizing also to an underage audience. So I don't think you want the direct link for this reason. And then, I went over the other advantages that come in there for the consumers. Also, I think something especially our platform is doing well. We embrace being a platform and a facilitator. We want to enable innovation. We want to enable companies that ultimately do further processing. And as you're probably aware, on the operator spectrum, there's quite a range between in-house trading, outsourced services, a mix of them, complete platform solutions. Ultimately, we operate in a model that is designed to maximize the exposure of the official data in the marketplace and drive the adoption of it. That is obviously an approach that stands contrary to someone trying to own every single segment of this value chain up until the bet, which would limit the availability of official data and ultimately limit all of the good things that, in my conviction, can come out of it when it's widely available. So that's another partnership model kind of thing that our role is addressing.
Thank you.
This is Judd Hannigan for the record. Moritz, good to see you. Thanks for being here today. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. My question for you is, what is the response today, and kind of like a temperature gauge from the publishers? You put a lot of weight into official data, right? Largely coming from publishers outside of the predominantly the CSGO scene, right? So what is their willingness to share this official data on a broad scale that you're seeing today? And I don't know if that's in shifting at all, or if that's changing, or where do you see that going as well? I'd like to know that for how we plan for the future.
Okay, Jad, also great to see you, albeit virtually. This is a big question. It's an important one. So zooming out of, let's say, CSGO and Dota again, where the tournament organizers have a bit of a special position given the stance of the game developer. We have multiple AAA game developers on our platform. The reality, and I mean, being here in Nevada, I'd like to compare it to pre-PASPA repeal. All the sports knew wagering was a billion-dollar industry connected to their intellectual property, and them not being part of the value chain, not having any visibility over the use of their IP, and I count data assets as part of that. And basically, it's not just wanting to be cut in, but wanting to turn something that was primarily a risk factor for the sport with no commercial consideration for them into a benefactor for the sport, into a growth opportunity, which I think is, again, a big reason why we're having a session today, ultimately for esports to also transform in a similar way. So what I have seen, and I've been the first session I ever did on this kind of topic was 2015 with Seth, pre-PASPA repeal. I couldn't really speak about wagering, or I could speak about data for integrity, maybe audience monetization, but data for betting wasn't really a thing to speak about. And that has changed. I think with PASPA repeal and with some of the largest game developers here, that view has changed. It's not like it was completely ignored or everybody was oblivious to it happening. So I think I can really see that in the last 3 to 5 years, there's quite a shift in the stance on it. We see a lot more engagement, and also we think all the game developers come from a way more informed standpoint at this stage. So generally, I think the precedents we have already, and I mean, I can only speak so much about a partnership without disclosing some of them coming up, but there's an appetite to doing this, and there's an appetite to doing it right. And I think the timing and the fact that we have this conversation is also a bit of an additional push factor for this to happen. Because, as I said before, as super rights holder, there is an inherent governance role that comes with that, since the sport is there. And assuming this role, I think is now something that is very, that works, that is palatable, that is aspired in many cases. And that's, I think, part of the driver.
Thank you.
Right, Brett Abarbanel for the record. Thank you so much, Morris. This was lovely. Some of my questions were already addressed, so thank you for that as well. Given your background, not just in esports data and esports data ecosystems, but also the time you spent with sports data ecosystems and your clear knowledge of this space, much more impressive, I think, perhaps than my knowledge of, say, the Bundesliga. What are any, if any, unique stakeholder conflicts of interest that we should consider for an esports ecosystem that might be different from a traditional sports event or sports betting data ecosystem?
Hi, Brett, and thanks for the question. Let me see. That's very interesting. Which potential conflicts of interest between stakeholders along that chain?
Yeah, Brett Abarbanel for the record again. To clarify, in terms of how this data is allocated, we talk about things like official data. In the sports world, of course, there's been all sorts of debate over what is official data, or if in some cases the debate has been, does it even exist? So when we talk about some of the stakeholders in esports and the different ownership rights that different stakeholders have, for example, Rob asked about the potential for game developers to have a direct relationship with betting operators. Does esports, I mean, the answer might be no. Does esports have anything unique in terms of stakeholder relationships with regard to data that might cause conflicts of interest that wouldn't be adequately addressed by what we already do for sport?
Okay, thanks for clarifying. So I think two parts to my answer. Number one is very much to what Robert Forbes asked before. I think the only way I could see this is the game developer, which is an entity, can impact the game, the balance of the game, or other rights holders are too close to people who have an incentive potentially for certain outcomes. And that is a principle that is very well established in sports and is guiding a lot of the regulation existing there. One thing where I'll say again, where esports has an advantage to all of this is the reason, and you alluded to this a bit, why people are arguing, is there even official data in sport, is because the quality of official data and unofficial data that's collected in a sport, in traditional sports, disseminated from the court side, is often incredibly similar in quality. Because if manual match state entry is the mechanism of obtaining the data, there's one person doing it officially from a press cabin sitting in the warmth, and there's 50 other people doing it in the stadium. And even with the best attempt to kick out scouts, you're not going to solve that. In esports, the whole exclusive nature of the official data is highlighted. It's massively underlined. Server is a very controlled environment. We work closely with the partners over the past years to also introduce ways where esports specific challenges in this regard appeared. For example, where crews that were involved in running the event or commentators or any other parties also had access to the data directly and were a potential source for a leak. These things can be addressed by good, business practices mainly and rules. And so if all of that is accounted for, this is really answered. And then this whole debate around, is there official data and shouldn't it be up to the consumer to decide what to use, is pretty much gone, because the use cases you can power with an official data asset in esports are so limited to the ones proper data that I don't see a product that's embracing the former is going to compete in a very competitive marketplace, also with a consumer that is like used to use the nicest and best digital interfaces ever. So a high bar of expectation. So I think, I understand I answer your question here indirect. So there's a reason. So no, I don't think these relationships exist for reasons I mentioned. And there's a great additional driver that somehow appears to be data related, of course, that is underlining that reality.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Hamilton, for the record, if that's it, thank you, Mr. Maurer. We appreciated that presentation.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Deputy Chief Marusic, please read in item number 4.
Item number 4 is the presentation of Amir Mirzay, COO of Baze Esports, and Martin Doxel, CEO of Baze Esport, on the function of official data providers for game publishers and esports competitions.
Welcome. Please state your names for the record.
Amir Mirzai.
Martin Daxelt.
Thank you. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Beautiful. Are we to share our slides? I take that as a yes. All right. Thanks for the opportunity to have us speak here. A couple of familiar faces. I'm thinking we have about 15 to 20 minutes. So again, I'm Amir. I'm the COO, one of the 2 managing directors at Baze Esports, Berlin-based company, employing about 85 FTE. I have a background of about 18 years in consumer internet. Part of it I spent with Google. I have with me Martin as the CEO and also managing director with about 25 years of experience, for example, as the CTO of Delivery Hero. I think this is one of the occasions where I'd say it's good to have competition. Grid and we are definitely kind of on the same side of the industry, pushing for standardization and integrity in esports data services. We have catered our presentation more towards the case of live betting integrity. We feel this is the more important part to focus around outside of a lot of different things that we're doing. Can you guys see my slides? Okay, so
Yes.
cool. Moving forward, so starting off with just a few live facts. Why is esports betting in terms of live data our focus topic? Esports in specific is a very interaction-driven betting sports. We have about 70 to 80% on a global average that is live betting. Esports itself brings unique challenges for betting and match integrity. This is one of the points that Moritz also brought. It is much different than traditional sports, which we will address later. The sports themselves are changing very dynamically and very frequently, which is unlike traditional sports as well. And then we're seeing a very fast growth rate, in particular in the live betting space, that is now also being adopted in states of the United States, where we're seeing that, whereas primarily before it was kind of guided by pre-match odds betting, now we're driving for online and live betting. Now, in terms of why we're leaving pre-match odds outside of this, so the pre-match creation of odds is basically driven by historic data and has similar integrity topics as traditional sports would have. So we're saying it's not really any different there from traditional sports, or one could argue that. Hence, we're focusing on the live part. So Baze Esports is a joint venture with Sportradar. Sportradar itself, the market leader in traditional sports data services, a company that's been at the market for over 21 years now, a publicly listed company, had an IPO last year. We founded the joint venture with them over 3 years ago, focusing exclusively on esports data services. Again, company with a headquarters in Berlin as Grid as well. We're serving about 350 plus data consumers and over 100 betting data clients. We're basically running the esports data business exclusively for this joint venture and on behalf of Sportradar. Growing basically within this construct has allowed Baze to take a lot of the, let's say, templates that were used in traditional sports, the leading sports, in the way that both the betting products as well as the integrity services have been built around that, and then adapt them for esports, now serving some of the biggest brands that we have out there, a lot of the bigger betting brands from Pinnacle to Bet365, but also media brands such as Google that has different requirements. What we're doing is slightly different than what Grid is doing. So in our case, we're really focusing on very few select partnerships, coming from the betting space, Riot and the ESL, you could argue, are the most important partnerships, most relevant partnerships in the esports betting space, as I will address a little bit later. We've built these relationships over the past 3-4 years consistently and ongoingly, as well as exclusively for betting related topics. We're kind of excluding Valorant there at this stage, which is Moritz's topic, which is not yet betting related, but more of a media use case. The reason for this we're addressing also a little later, why we're going for select few partnerships and only for these 3 titles, League of Legends, Dota, and Counter-Strike. We're seeing ourselves as a service provider to the content right holders themselves, working in parallel directly with the demand side, but also via B2B service providers such as Cabby, Pinnacle, Better, as well as our joint venture partner, Sportradar. So we're looking to provide sort of a maximum in terms of distribution. We have multiple touch points on any size of companies in the betting space, and our job is to aggregate feedback, to develop products, and to expand the service and improve it ongoingly with the companies like Riot and ESL. So the business model behind it is fairly easy. We're licensing data, putting it through our live data infrastructure as kind of the independent data handler. In the middle, we're distributing it, and then we're participating on revenue shares and minimum guarantees, both on the demand side as well as pushing that back to our content right holders. So anything that we're doing in this particular case commercially is always driven in the interest of our content providers. Overall, we're sharing this whole deck. There's a lot more information here. I'll just skip through a few of these pieces, also because Moritz has addressed some of them very correctly. I'll just highlight some of the differences maybe or additions that we might have. So we're deep in the betting space, but we're also driving a few of the other initiatives. So just to highlight one, in terms of particularly Riot Games, we've recently launched a team data portal that has 4 types of historic data files that professional teams of Riot's League of Legends Pro League are using. In this particular part, this has been built for over professional teams. We've already onboarded about 200 over the course of 3 to 6 months. We have to say that data integrity is incredibly important to us. In this case, for example, we're also receiving replay files for training matches, so-called scrim games, scrim matches of these professional teams that would basically show new tactics, new strategy of these teams as they develop and as they move forward. They're entrusted to us as, again, an independent source in the middle, and we're taking integrity incredibly important as part of this role. So as discussed, we're focusing exclusively on 3 titles: League of Legends, CSGO, and Dota, and merely sort of over the span of 5, sometimes up to 6 or 7 content providers, but the core of them basically being 5 that we're driving over the course of longer periods of time. We're trying not to do one-off partnerships, because outside of kind of what meets the eye in terms of a pure data distribution, a lot of the additional services that are being driven in terms of integrity and operations to solidify a betting offering are usually by themselves taking several years to improve. So again, even within our partnerships that we've driven and taken to market with Riot and the ESL, we're still improving on items like broadcast delays and operations issues over the course of the time, just to continuously address integrity concerns, to continuously make data more available and more reliable. As we go along, and as we kind of go into why we're very much set on these 3 game titles that we're covering through our content providers, just a quick look, and as Moritz already said, the big difference between traditional sports and esports is esports data collection manually is basically impossible. We start from the match events themselves, so any sport in the traditional space has usually a range of 1 to a few referees that can basically decide on the match event one by one, be that in soccer, be that a goal or a throw-in or a corner kick, or in football a touchdown or whatever. There's always one action happening at a time that can be collected by one person at a time. The complexity of the sport itself in that is fairly simple versus esports, where a lot of things are happening at the same time. you have 5-on-5 players. All of them usually have a different gold or cash count, have different items, different equipments, have kill counts that kind of run in parallel, including kind of when you look at, you know, the data point frequency that is being created from that, very low, with a few data points being created in traditional sports over the course of a match, to of over 100 data points that we collect per second, for example, for League of Legends. So in that context, just to start building the case on why automated collection versus unsanctioned, unlicensed, manual, or even scraped collection is unsuitable. On-screen visibility is a big part of that. In particular, if we're going from visual collection to the visibility of the playfield. In traditional sports, you're meant to see your opponent, you're meant to see the whole playfield. In esports, that's not the case. Public stream delays, a very, very significant part and a very big driver in our decision only to cover game titles that are meant or basically that are sanctioned for betting offering, is that public stream delays play a very large role in the integrity of betting itself. So as we're going towards traditional sports, the match happening versus the public stream in terms of delay is usually sub 15 seconds, sometimes just as much as 5-6 seconds in a way, meaning as the game happens, the match gets broadcast to the outside. In esports, that's differently. Part of that is due to the fact that not all of the events that we have are played on site, meaning on location, offline. In terms of LAN infrastructure that is in a venue. Some of these are distributed kind of across the world and are being played remotely. Then it itself is not necessarily a critical issue that makes it impossible to use them for betting, but you have to be very aligned in terms of being aware of the data delays that are in place, meaning as the match happens, the data that is supplied needs to be supplied to betting operators first before the public stream gets basically a video. Now, if you would do it differently, and I think the issue here is obvious, if there's an unsanctioned offering that doesn't have an underlaid data stream going out to betting operators at the very first second, then any of the seconds or any of the minutes that are in between the match happening and the public stream that is being scraped off can be used with insider information for betting, meaning anybody that is on the inside of any kind of match that would know that there's an unsanctioned betting offering or a betting offering going on unofficial data streams can go to these websites and place bets with the knowledge of what's going to happen next. So a very big part of the story and of the narrative that we have for Baze and our decision in terms of where we're headed with our product is that official data needs to be at the very core, nonetheless, to mitigate data delays. And hence, data collection needs to be automated to also cover for probability models that are much more complex to calculate. Now, if we look at what that results in and what the positioning is that Baze sees for itself, and with that intention in mind, is that data collection has to be automated, needs to lead to a very high sense of data quality. Data speed needs to be very high. Data rights need to have an official license attached to it. That is not the case for data that is scraped off of any kind of streams or any kind of other sources of the internet, in particular not when there's safeguards safeguards in place on the website of that particular offering, meaning a YouTube, for example, does not intend to be scraped for its content. A Bet365 as a betting operator does not intend to be used for scraping, and is actively even trying to prevent that. This is knowledge that is not very common in the space, but needs to be upheld to make sure that everybody understand what legitimate offerings are and where they cross the line from what people might perceive as a gray market actually into the black market. So anything other than official license for Baze in particular is unacceptable in terms of the ecosystem, also because the reliability of an ongoing data stream cannot be provided. Distribution control for the content right holder is not there, meaning for a content right holder to not want to, for example, offer some matches for betting, there's no way to control this. If it is not, if data distribution is not being performed within a certain framework, that leads to lags in integrity, whereas, as I said, not just from the match integrity side, also from the betting integrity side, data delays, anybody that kind of takes place. If there is not a closed system in place, then it's very hard to manage where the data is flowing, where it's coming from, or who has access to it before it gets to a betting operator. So keeping that chain as short and as compact as possible with reliable source is at the very core of what we deem necessary, and this list could very well be as a requirements list for betting operators in the US. And hence, and sort of the last piece, revenue allocation, of course, we feel it's only fair for that revenue scheme that we have provided to you to flow back to the content providers, which you don't have if data sources are used that are being scraped. In that context, data service providers, as they call themselves, that go out scraping data in particular, they do not pay any royalties or any fees back to the ecosystem. Means the teams don't see any of it, the content providers, the league operators, the game publishers, and hence the parties that need to invest in the integrity of the sports do not see their fair share of the revenue. So as we dive deeper, then again, why is it that we're covering these three titles in particular: League of Legends, Counter-Strike, and Dota? I think if we're looking at the very bottom of the screen, if we're looking at a global average, it's these three titles that generate, by our knowledge, roughly 90% of global esports GGR. Meaning most of the betting is happening in terms of these three particular titles. What they have in common is that all three of them are at the market already for over 12 plus years. I think Counter-Strike is at about 20 or 25 years already of a certain game that has been kind of redefined and balanced, but not changed at the very core over the course of this whole time. Hence, it has built a very strong following of players, of fans, of events, of a whole ecosystem that drives eyeballs, and hence eyeballs driving basically the professionalization of the sport, of professional teams and events and prize pools that go along with it. For any other sport to kind of catch up to this, we don't say it's impossible, but it requires significant doing and goal of the game publisher. Valve in particular with CSGO and Dota is a little bit of, let's say, of the odd one out in this whole space, and in our perspective is not really, cannot be really be taken as, let's say, as an example for how a game publisher should be involved in an esports in particular. Riot, as we know, for their IP League of Legends, is the game publisher. They're also the league operator. They also have their own sanctioned betting offering that they've pushed into the market, while Valve is the game publisher for these two titles, but is not the league operator. So main league operator in this particular case is ESL with sanctioned betting offerings. So Valve is aware that betting is taking place, hence enabling data service providers to be logged in directly into the game lobby as the games take place to get undelayed access to the data feeds as they go on. But beyond that, they're not deeply involved in terms of improving the offering. Now, if we're looking at other game providers, and this is really important, and this is also why we're, even if there is a tournament organizer that would, offer, let's say, Rainbow Six, Call of Duty, PUBG, if, in our experience and in our view, if the game publisher is not explicitly content and engaged and also bought in to the, let's say, to the notion and to the objective of supporting betting, then we as Baze will not engage. The reason being, and this is I think examples that need to be there. We're familiar. Let's look at, for example, at Krafton's offering, so to say. It's a very lightweight kind of API that these guys have in terms of that can provide data. While they have an API, for example, that could provide the data for a betting offering, the delay on the data that they give out is about 25 minutes. Meaning, even if you're not scraping it from anything, if you're not parsing it, if you're just going by that API that we feel should be the most reliable source that comes straight from the game publisher, then basically the first data that you can get, that you can give to a betting operator, is 25 minutes old after that match has already begun. In our eyes, that's unacceptable. This is something that I think should be kind of be looked at and taken into consideration title by title as we go on. I think the question came up before. If there's a TO, a tournament organizer, should they be kind of bulk exempt for any kind of sports? I'd say personally no. I'd say you have to look at the game titles. You can do a tournament organizer for a specific game title, which also implies a certain, let's say, infrastructure and a certain technology that is used. For example, Counter-Strike and Dota are sanctioned betting offerings for the ESL. With the ESL, we cover these titles because we know that with our technology, we get underlaid access to that data, and we can, in a sort of a long-standing relationship, we can improve this to get this, or we improve this over the course of the time to get this to high quality, very stable setting. Now, if the game publisher does not support it, does not do their part in terms of giving out, for example, verified fixtures or resulting of the matches or an API that provides data fast enough, then in our perspective, even if it's the ESL, we personally won't take the data. Now, integrity on that end, I think, is at the very core of what needs to be done. And I think, as the question was being asked before, could there be any conflict of interest? Should content sources and content users, sort of the betting industry and the content providers, be kind of connected directly? We know that neither sides wants that. We know that from our long-standing relation with Riot, or for example Bet365, with us being an independent provider in the middle, we feel this is a crucial setup, because you need some level of independence, and both of these guys, both sides, want to be disconnected in terms of any kind of liability or any kind of doubt into the integrity of their offering on either side. Same goes for integrity. So integrity, in our perspective, needs to be a service provider that caters to both sides. Historically, our offering has been driven by Sportradar Integrity, of course, as our joint venture sister. Sportradar Integrity, with over 100 integrity specialists, having done kind of any kind of professional event that you could think of, from Wimbledon to UEFA Champions League and FIFA World Cup and so on and so forth, in terms of investigations, match integrity, and so on. We will work with these folks in terms of Riot. When we took Riot with League of Legends to market as the first proper betting-oriented data offering to the market, we introduced them with Sportradar Integrity first, basically having them set up at a cost per match that they are paying to get every single match monitored. In our eyes, this is the best practice as it kind of goes along. We had discussions with Activision Blizzard in the past as well. We ended up not taking the data, but we did introduce the same scheme. So getting Sportradar Integrity involved can be Sportradar Integrity, or now, as we're kind of building a new offering with our portfolio sister, US Integrity, US-based company, as most of you guys know from the traditional sports space. We're building an integrity offering with them that is working on a per match basis, catering in particular to betting operators. Whereas we're providing, based on the data, on the live data and the match probabilities that we generate from them, we're basically helping produce a product that would identify, based on better behavior, punter behavior, basically going into the delta of expected behavior versus punter behavior, and spotting, cases where punter behavior is unexpected. So this is, I think, a very good example of how a reliable data stream and the matching probabilities that we generate, the data science that we generate from this on a per match basis, can lead to better match integrity and match monitoring. And we feel this, at the very instance, is critical to guarantee the longevity and sustainability of any esport, right? So, in particular, if we're talking about integrity offerings, we feel it has to be a for-profit offering. It has to be done by a professional third party that goes out there. And then the 5 measures for safer esports betting, kind of just summarizing what we had discussed. We feel, for one, if we're asking what should be required by sort of to get offerings whitelisted. We think a betting offering has to be based on official data directly from the source. It has to be covered by an integrity service. Technical measures such as data delays need to be measured. Sorry, that was actually point 4. So technical measures, especially on the IT side, need to be in place to ensure the security of data and of access to that data. Organizational measures such as being aligned on data delays as well as on broadcast delays need to be at the very center of the collaboration between content provider, data service provider, and the betting operator, and then legal measures, of course, to give everything a proper contextual frame. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we have a bunch of other slides in the appendix. They will be shared in a PDF. We're more than happy to engage into further discussions with anybody that's interested, and we hope this was helpful.
Paul Hamilton for the record. Thank you. Do any of the committee members have any questions or comments?
Lavelle Walker for the record. Amir, thank you for all that education. It was great. Learned a lot through that exercise. Quick question from the consumer's experience with live betting on esports today. Given the delay that exists and how fast these markets come in, how are they adopting today versus how you see it going in the future?
So I mean, we have a little bit. So I think just taking a step back from the user experience, I think the target group wants action. They want live betting. So in that case, if we're looking by revenue, I think the majority still goes to very kind of core and simple bets. But as we kind of progress, you'll see different data service providers branch out and produce very specific offerings for regions or for game titles. As for example, parts of Asia like to bet in a different manner than they like to do it in North America, and then kind of get a different level of depth and features to get along with that. And again, at the very core, you can do all of these things if you have a full roster, like the full depth of a data profile that you can provide to these guys. And so in our case, particularly if we're looking, for example, at our odds offering, we're just launching it. We're just launching a new odds offering to the market where we're actually addressing specifically that. We're providing a unified API basically to our operators, and then on the back side, we're collecting multiple feeds that our betting operators can choose from. So they can say, I like these kind of bets for this title from this operator, and I like those kind of bets, and they can basically mix and match to create a profile of bets that is suitable for their region, that's suitable for their target audience. Yeah. Was that helpful?
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Hi, Brandon Snow for the record. Amir, nice to see you, and thanks for calling in late. I know from Europe, I'm here as well, so it's nice to see someone also sitting in the dark. I've got just a question and an overall comment for you. So many of the examples that you and Grid were talking about focused on the big publishers who are giving that data, need to give you that data directly. But I saw a footnote in your presentation about the whole other side of the esport industry as it relates to traditional sports and leagues around the NBA, the NFL, Formula One, and others. Is there anything we need to be considerate of or thinking through as it relates to how data is shared and the integrity of that data coming from the esport world of traditional sports and the rights holder being different than the publisher in that case? Is there something that we need to be aware of that's different than most of the examples that both you and Grid are using coming from video game publishers like Activision, Blizzard, or Riot?
Yeah, I mean, and I just think in general, we're always coming back. The reason why we're kind of very selective about the game titles that we expand, and why we're looking for 3-year engagements with content providers, be that an ESL or be that a Riot or whatever, is because we need consistency, right? Consistency has to do with the commitment of a game publisher. Even if these guys are not the tournament organizers in any kind of way, we need that commitment that it's okay, what we're doing here, and that they're, even if they don't want to do it themselves, then the TOs can do it with the data providers on that end. Which is also why, for example, we as Baze actually have the only sanctioned FIFA football offering in terms of e-leagues football. with the German virtual Bundesliga together, most of the offerings that sit outside of that are unsanctioned because EA Sports doesn't want it, NBA 2K, those guys from 2K don't want it, and in that context, they can always pull the plug at any time. Apart from not providing the data, not providing the consistency and the support, you're always running into kind of a legal, let's say, at least gray zone, if not black zone, in that context. So understanding the stance of the game publishers, even if they don't want to be the tournament organizer, like in Valve's case, I think is very important, right? And that again has to do with education. That again has to do, I think, with folks like us presenting to them as well, which we are doing to educate, to show them that betting is happening either way, in particular live betting, and it is happening on unsanctioned data offerings, and we have to do our best to find and support data offerings that can support legal wide market betting. Was that helpful?
Yeah, Brandon Snow for the record. Just a quick follow-up on that. So I guess what I'm trying to get to a little bit is almost all of the examples being used here are around video game publishers who own the title. And in the case of the NBA, the NFL, and this entire other sort of e-league structure and business where there's already gambling happening on the traditional sport, I'm just trying to understand if there's anything that we need to be aware of that's unique to a dynamic where you have a Formula One, an NBA, and NFL as the rights holder, licensing it out to a third party like EA or whomever, structuring then tournaments off the back end of that. Or are you saying, look, it's the same, doesn't really matter if it's coming from a system like that or a system where where the rights holder is the publisher?
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm saying exactly that. I'm saying that the game publishers in e-league sports, be it FIFA or be it NBA 2K or whatever, they haven't sanctioned the offering. This is, I think, is very important, and so it tells you something. You have to look at it with a very critical eye at these e-leagues offerings. How are they being done? Who's looking at them? Who's protecting them from the integrity side? Who's playing there? Just because it's a sport that's relatively easy for other people to comprehend and maybe to perform easier than, let's say, 5-on-5 Counter-Strike, it is to put two people versus on basically in FIFA or NBA 2K doesn't make it a good offering, right? This is why also part of a very core central part where we disagree, for example, with what Moritz says, we're not dabbling with the amateur stuff. Because in the end of the day, you cannot, if you don't have any kind of framework that says who is on the inside of this match, who knows where the data is flowing, who is observing it, be it on site or be it from a data and an integrity perspective, then there's no way to guarantee that the betting operator's position is being protected. There's too much unregulated action going on the inside that then is being sold as a high quality data product to operators, and that leads to a whole set of risks.
We have some backup slides which show some of the risk and what can happen. For example, in lower leagues, sometimes players are replaced by other players and play under another name, so which makes it completely unusable for betting. And there's a lot of risk, and it's really take a lot of time to educate the tournament organizers to take measures. And the lower the prize pool is, and the lower the tier of the tournament is, the more difficult it is to uphold this high standards we need for betting.
Perhaps it is something that we can discuss at another time, but the tournament structure, this is what we're looking at. If we're buying content, we're looking at the structure. Who's the tournament organizer? Where are they playing? Who's observing? Is there match integrity in place? Can their data delays be guaranteed? Is it an environment that is sealed off in some kind of way that third parties cannot interact? And do the operators know? I mean, literally, there's a lot of e-leagues content out there that's played somewhere in Romania or somewhere in a big gymnasium with 100 people sitting there for 24 hours. That's not esports.
Maybe to make it a bit more drastic, at the moment, if we look at the e-leagues, also FIFA and so on, 99% of this data usages for betting are not legal, also not sanctioned. If Electronic Arts would get aware of that, they might take measures.
Thank you. Except they don't have the FIFA rights anymore, but yes. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Hi, Che Chow for the record. Hey, Amir. It's nice to see you again. So you guys talk about live betting monitoring as a big focus for you guys, and as you know, the goal of a lot of our conversations today are focused on growing esports wagering in Nevada through and establishing the foundation of integrity. So, and I think that like it would be good to illustrate for us, just like kind of if you have a concrete example from your guys' illustrative history in terms of monitoring sports betting, like when can you give us a scenario when you guys are able to flag a problematic wagering event, and then in that example, how did you resolve it? Who were the stakeholders? And sort of walk us through that and what the board might need to do at one point.
Yeah, so it's for me was also fascinating as I joined Baze. So Sportradar joint venture, Sportradar Integrity. I'd say one of the very big assets that Sportradar Integrity has is that it has access to some of the data that Sportradar has through its clients. So Sportradar, I think about 900 clients total. 200 of them, 200 plus of these clients globally, betting operators, use the so-called managed trading solution, which is basically the data feeds, including basically data feeds as well as a risk managed solution that basically sets the risks for all type of bets, right? Basically saying this match is betting too much, I'm setting my limit here, this player is winning too much, and so on. So, and within that, as part of that, they're seeing basically every transaction, every bet that goes through for that betting operator, not just for our content, right? And so within that, and it was, I think, at a time where we didn't yet have all of Riot's content, basically all of Riot's content offered through us and protected as part of match integrity. It was flagged by Sportradar Integrity to us that said, hey guys, can we speak to Riot, or can you help kind of look into your data as well as work with Riot to look at these particular data points for these and these matches, because we have a player that has always bet with astonishing accuracy, usually about 1 minute before an event happened, he placed the bet, right? It's pretty obvious in some of these cases. And it just shows why it's so important to have a closed system where the betting operator pays somebody to do this kind of monitoring, where technologically you kind of need to build a bridge, right? Maybe through an independent party like us that can help with managing this type of data, whereas it shouldn't be kind of directly discussed with the game publisher.
Maybe another interesting example. There is, maybe you know what a foreign language caster is. So the tournament organizer, he's producing in English and maybe German, depending on the country. And for other languages, he gives the broadcast right away to other companies, for example, to produce a stream in Russian. And he gets a part of the revenues back in return. And before we intervened there, very often the foreign language casters got direct lobby access without delay. And some of those companies was, let's say, besides their main business, building a second business and extracting data and reselling the data without control. And that's first a commercial problem, but what makes it worse, the data can leak to the teams. And that's maybe one of the key differences to traditional sports. If data are leaking, it can influence the outcome of the match. Yeah, that's not in traditional sports. In traditional sports, both soccer teams sees everything. In esports, you have this concept of a vision. So the one team does not see fully the map, and they do not see fully where the enemies are. And if this data is leaking now by certain things, so for example, this is why the broadcast is delayed. This is one of the first reasons to uphold the match integrity. But now, if, for example, such a foreign language caster, he gives, or a trader of the foreign language caster gives this data to a team, yeah, or to the coach of the team, and he can funnel this information back during the match to a team member, they would have an unfair advantage. So they would influence the outcome of the match. And so that's a very complex topic, this whole delay topic. Bookmakers have data without delay, but they are not allowed to leak it. So we need really strong protection on that side.
This is Judd Hanning
Thank
for
you.
the record. Martin, that was actually going to be my question is, could you guys talk a little bit more about the stream delay, the reasons for it, and then the risks and benefits around it? I think having a little more color around that would probably be helpful for all of us too. As a tournament organizer, we're familiar with it, but I'm familiar with it. But I just I think it would be good color because it does seem like it opens up an area of risk to the integrity.
Ami, you want to take or?
Maybe I can start and you can add to it. But this you're absolutely correct. It is a double-edged sword. So on the one side, data delays are important in esports for the reasons that Martin just said. That goes all the way back to the on-site event. So in the past, if you had a team sitting there and they would see the screen basically where it's sort of in the top arenas, you can see that the teams sit in a cabin and they can't see the front of a panel. They'd only see the backs of the large screen panels. Back in the day, it wasn't like that, as folks were not aware of that. And then you could, for example, as a League of Legends team, see where the other team was hiding in the bushes, right? In that case, for example, you need to delay even on-site, even within a stadium for, let's say, about 15 seconds or 20 seconds, something like that, to make sure that teams cannot see what's going on or that nobody else can see what's going on. At the top events, they also listen to the audio, let's say, of the team and of the coaches and so on, just to make sure that no information is kind of passed around. But this is one of the very basic steps of where integrity is needed. Then when there's offsite, so basically when there's online matches as they're called, that are not played in a stadium, they're played somewhere else outside, you want sort of an additional level of delay that can go up to 45 seconds, for example, to make sure that nobody that has a screen sitting somewhere can kind of funnel information back to the team and then kind of create that same part. But the longer this delay gets, the more the probability that somebody that sits on the inside of any of these of the production or on site with the teams or wherever that can use that to their advantage. So in our perspective, this is manageable, usually somewhere between 15 to 45 seconds. We would say is the sweet spot. Anything beyond that, which can still happen in some cases. Again, one of the discussions that we're having with Crafton around PUBG is we're saying if you want to do a betting offering, then 25 minutes is worst case. This is the exposure that the betting operators have in this case for anything that is crafted that draws from an official API cannot be managed. So we're saying, in particular post-COVID now, as some events return to the stadiums, not all will kind of return. Some are meant also to be played online. You want to be somewhere in that sub-minute time frame from my perspective, and then if it's up to 5 minutes, it's still kind of manageable. Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, it's basically, unfortunately, we have 4 goals and conflict between these goals. So as Amir pointed out, so first, and this is the most important for the tournament organizer and game publisher, match integrity. No team should have an unfair advantage. So it needs to be avoided that they somehow get information about the enemy team, which they shouldn't have. And this is achieved by introducing this delay for the broadcasts. And as Amir said, even in the venue. Second aspect is betting integrity, betting risk and betting integrity for the operators. So of course, they want to have the fastest data. And this is what we are providing and Crit is providing. We get the data undelayed and give it to the operators undelayed. Okay, now we have the risk that the operators use the data in a way which is not intended. So, for example, leak it, or sell it to a team, which would again is contradicting our first, violating our first objective. Then we have the user experience, and this is now starts to get a problem. The bigger the delay is between the public stream and the data the bookmaker receives. The bookmaker builds, the operator builds this data on undelayed, on our undelayed data, but on YouTube we see it delayed by 45 seconds or even 5 minutes. That means what the user might see on YouTube is already 5 minutes old, while the odds he's seeing is for the current state. That can be mitigated by tools the operator uses, visualization tools. So the user is not, the punter is not looking basically at YouTube, but he sees the score at the moment and can make the opinion there. And then the last point is spoiler. So if the operator exposes too much data, there are people who are in the operator side and go then to the Twitch chat and expose, yeah, the match is already finished, while it's on Twitch 5 minutes delay. Then the tournament organizers again unhappy. This is basically the world we are living in, and we are working very hard with all parties to find the best solution, the best settings, that nobody has an unfair advantage and everybody is somehow happy. It sounds very complex. This is complex.
It is very complex, but that's why we're going title by title.
Just Judd Hannigan again for the record. Does it also afford the bookmakers time to enhance their live offering, right? From an in-game betting standpoint,
Yep.
is that a contributing factor to the pros side of it?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is for a betting operator is really, as the betting operator wants the data undelayed, so gets it from us undelayed in the best case, and turns that into odds or has the odds basically changing. Now between that and the public stream, there can be a few minutes, but at least half a minute or 15 seconds. Now, anything that's more than 10 to 15 seconds, if you ask a betting operator, is too much of a disconnect for the punter and sort of between the odds changing and what's happening in the match, and they feel that they're at a disadvantage. This is why you also want scoreboards that are kind of running and changing within that part, kind of within these 10 seconds, as we have, for example, with a Bet365 that get a visualization from us to put on that side as well. This is a little bit of the difficulty and exactly why we're running into let's say some conflicts, in particular with tournament organizers, as say my public stream is 5 minutes delayed, but you can already see what the results are. If somebody intentionally would go to Bet365 and look at the scoreboard and then go and post spoilers on the public stream, that I would say is almost the worst case, and let's say is to be rated lower as an issue than to further delay the data for the betting operator, right? So we're having in the spectrum of public stream is 5 minutes delayed or 3 minutes or whatever, to the data feed for the betting operator is delayed with the visualization. The betting operator needs to get the data live at any cost, because any second that is between the match happening and the odds changing, any second in addition can be used against the operator with people with inside knowledge.
Thank you.
Hi, Robbie Forbes for the record. Amir Martin, good to see you again. It's been a while. Is the latency issue that you're describing specific to in-play wagering, or is it also an issue for results-based wagering, which is where the odds and the wager are fixed at the start of a match?
Let's say it's particularly a live betting issue. Now, if let's say the resulting, let's say Craft and PUBG, if in that case, you have a pre-match bet, and that bet is basically not resulted within 25 minutes after it's over, that's just a bad user experience, right? It's the guys that they want to result it, they want to have the funds available to place the next bet. If that takes half an hour or even longer, then this is just a bad experience. But from an integrity standpoint, it's a live betting issue.
Thank you, Robbie Forbes for the record. So on the flip side of that, latency is an issue regardless of whether you're talking about a publisher provided AP that's like open source public available to everybody, or whether you're going through a data processor like Baze or like Grid. Latency seems to be the critical issue for in-play betting.
Yeah, latency is a very important part. Now, the part again is that if there is an intention, if there is a sanctioned betting offering, then usually all parties work together to align on these delays. Now, for anything that goes outside, there's just a tournament operator that's offering live bets on an unsanctioned offering, then you're lacking this part where you can address this openly, as we do. For example, we speak to Valve. And we tell them our opinion, we give them insights. Sometimes it even changes something. So in particular, for the language casters, as Martin said, we're able to restrict access on that perspective. Now, if you don't have that buy-in, it's just an issue that you don't work together to resolve and improve. Martin?
It depends on the game title. Yeah. Unfortunately, for the big game titles, League of Legends, CS:GO, Dota, and where this vision plays a role, every tournament organizer or game publisher will introduce this broadcast delay, because otherwise he would affect his match integrity, because it's impossible also to 100% avoid that the team somehow gets the information. For other game titles where you do not have this vision topic, for example, FIFA, yeah, all teams see what is happening. There's no need for broadcast delay. The same for Rocket League. Yeah, also the problem is not so big, or maybe there's even no problem.
Correct.
Thank you.
Chairman Paul Hamilton, for the record. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot.
I think with that, let's give the committee and those helping a bio break, call it 10 minutes. Hello, thanks everyone. Chairman Paul Hamilton for the record. Deputy Chief Marusic, please read in item number 5.
Item number 5 is the presentation of Vlastimil Venklik, CEO of Odin GG, and Marek Sukar, Managing Director of Odin GG, on how betting lines for wagering on esports are created and how official data is used to set such lines.
Welcome. Please state your names for the record.
Hi, this is Marek Sucha, Head of Partnerships at Odin GG.
Hi, this is Vlastimil Venklik, CEO for the GG.
We hear you guys. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thanks of all. Many thanks for the opportunity to speak in front of the board. Also, sorry, it is almost midnight over here, so if I'm not the sharpest, please bear with me. With that being said, we were asked from the board to present today the topic about the betting lines that are used for wagering on esports competitions. With that being said, I would mostly try to address the topic, not self-present Odin GG, and hopefully we'll have a lot of time also for the upcoming questions. With that being said, a quick introduction of Odin GG. We are B2B esports odds feed, risk management, and iframe provider. We work with the partners globally, and we are focusing on truly live, engaging content when it comes to esports betting. With that being said, currently we are more than 90 people in the company. We have our solution and partners available on 6 continents. We are already live and legally operating in New Jersey, in US. We have already applied for the license in Ontario, and we are looking at Nevada and Colorado also in the other batch of the licensing. With that being said, a really quick introduction of Odin, who we work with, what we do, and how we do it, and then we will go directly to the topic. When it comes to our portfolio of clients, I would say that we work with 3 distinctive groups of partners. First being the traditional bookmakers, such as Betway, operating globally, or YOLO Group, or again, global operator, Tipspot operating and heavy license in Czech Republic and Slovakia, Etabet license in Spain and Peru, Betex license in Poland. We also work with multiple esports-centric bookmakers for which the esports betting is bread and butter of their business. We work with Esports Entertainment Group, that is Nasdaq quoted company, with Luckbox and Lootbet from React Gaming Group, which are quoted at TSX in Canada. We work also with Thunderpig, a global operator, and Picklebet that is licensed in Australia. With that being said, we do not work only directly with the bookmakers. We work also with platforms through which we get access to all of their clients. So we have dozens of platforms available, through each of them dozens of clients that they have. Our solutions such as esports, odds feed, or iframe are being available and provided to them. Among the most noticeable ones, I can mention Scientific Games, Aspire Global, Altena, and others. With that being said, the critical thing that we will address, and I will address a couple of times across the presentation, is that we provide our clients with these management services, which is critical when it comes to esports and specifically integrated within the esports. With that being said, just a quick sort of touch of our most sophisticated solution, which is iframe solution. With this solution embedded onto the web page of a particular bookmaker, we are able to provide them the entire solution with one integration, which provides him with the esports UI UX for the bettors, with live stream, with live scoreboard, provided with multiple lifelines, also pre-match lines, and supported by the risk management as the entire platform, which supports this solution. It is up to the operator whether they select to run the risk management themselves or whether they outsource it to us. But I would say 90% of the cases, we are the ones managing the risk management on behalf of our operators, of our partners. One of the things that was already touched was pretty much distinction between pre-match and live. This was, I guess, addressed already by Amir. So I will go through this really quickly. What we are seeing, 80% of the volume is for live betting, only 20% is for pre-match. The important part of this is that when it comes to the titles, there are different esports titles, and they are really different in their core nature. Counter-Strike is extremely fast-paced, while, for example, League of Legends and Dota 2 are extremely complex. So there is also a slightly different proposition or the things then when it comes to data points that are being actually processed. All of that probabilities that are being calculated, they are not just calculated as true probabilities depending on what is happening in the game, but many times also adjusted depending on the incoming bets. So both the liability and the risk management appetite of the bookmakers are actually considered. With that being said, and quickly touch and coming back to the original topic, how we calculate the live esports odds. Odin GG has built a proprietary technology on Greenfield where we actually built it with esports on mind. So it's fully scalable, it's built upon low latency infrastructure, and it's fully automated. With this being said, there are multiple games that are being played. We are actually getting the data from various games titles. These live data are being standardized, and I will go into the details in the upcoming slides. These data fed our predictive models, and on top of it, there is trading available, or only through trading, the final odds are being calculated, and these final odds are being distributed to our partners such as Betway, Scientific Games, Aspire Global, and others. With this being said, this is a full technological solution where we apply new technologies such as machine learning technologies, and the full stack is really low latency. With that being said, in the upcoming parts, I will focus mostly on live data and their gathering, and then as an input, and the odds as the output. And I will speak about that in much more details. When it comes to live data, esports is yet being developed as an industry. So you do not have one particular solution that will solve all your needs. So we as esports odds feed provider, we need to actually be able to tackle and process multiple different sources because the tournaments organizers as well as publishers are behaving differently. So the data that we are able to process to actually properly calculate esports odds is games API. It can be that we get the data directly from the server, with the partners that we cooperate with. With some of the data, there is no direct data available. It is only public stream. So in this sense, we are able, through image recognition, to get the data through the public official stream. And one of the other options, of course, last but not least, is to cooperate with the official data partners. This way, the live data can be sourced. On the other hand, as the output, the data are fed to predictive models. But this is not the only thing that actually creates the final probabilities over certain situations happening in the game. It is critical also to properly trade the lines. So there are experted traders that are actually overviewing the live games. They are able to make certain predictions. They are able to suspend the lines. They are able to slightly shift the lines. So they are actually managing this on behalf of our partners. On top of it, there is the entire risk management in place where we are seeing bets from our partners. As I mentioned before, majority of our partners, they have the risk management with us. So we are able in real time to see their bets as they are incoming in real time, both for pre-match and live. This gives us a couple of advantages, which is first, we understand the market sentiment. So who is betting on where, and we are seeing a certain patterns. Secondary, if we are losing money on a certain lines, we are able to improve our models over time because we are seeing this is actually happening. At the same time, if something like this is happening, trader can also react in real time and have a certain tools in place to actually limit this and mitigate the risk for our partners. Last but not least, or actually to the second point, I will add that esports, on the contrary to traditional sports, is highly impacted by something that is called patches. So the game is constantly evolving. Publishers are constantly improving the game to not make it stale. So you have different heroes, new heroes, you have different maps used in Counter-Strike from time to time. So the models that we had 1 year ago will be right now obsolete, and most probably we will be generating losses for our partners. Therefore, we need to constantly update them. Third and critical part of the risk management is also the identification of potential match fixing cases. Because we are seeing the bet slips, we are able to identify certain patterns. There are certain algorithms for both pre-match and live bets where we are seeing a certain behavior, and either the algorithms can actually interfere, they can send alerts to the traders that can take a look at it. And with this way, and there was actually a question already, so we can get into the details if you want, but it happened to us a couple of times. We were able to identify match fixing in live. We were able to not result the markets, so we let it go. We approached our partner where it happened, how they wanted to react to that. The reply was, yeah, void it, and we will see. And no bettors came after our partner, our bookmaker, because they knew we knew. So there are the ways how you are able to identify even this because of the incoming bet slips and because of all the algorithms that we have in place. On top of it, because we have this kind of overview, we have also extensive blacklist for both teams and tournaments. So if this something like this happen, we are putting them on blacklist. So we are not providing the odds for them anymore, neither for pre-match, neither for live. At the same time, we are constantly discussing this with our partnership network. So essentially, these teams will many times be punished the way that they cannot participate on a certain tournaments, because the tournaments are many times sponsored by our partners, and they will tell them we do not want these teams to be there. So essentially, through our network, the esports is being cleaning itself. With that being said, this is the way how the final odds are being calculated and sent to our partners. So as I mentioned, it is not only about the predictive models. There is much more that meets the eye to actually send the odds, the final odds, to our partners. Because I was in Naga conference a couple of weeks ago, and I guess this was the topic, this was the major topic after the underage topic that many of the regulators actually asked, and it was integrity concern. So what I wanted to sort of discuss at this platform as well is how integrity is being actually addressed, how it can be addressed, and what are the things that we can do about it. With that being said, when you are looking at the integrity concerns, many times this is about cheating and match fixing. And there are only two critical touch points that can address this. It is content side and it is betting side. On the content side, we are speaking about organizers like ESL, PGL, Riot. All of these mentioned have their own policies in place, code of conduct. Many times they are doing, they have anti-cheats, they are doing doping testing. They are the one producing the content for tournaments. At the same time, to spot match fixing for them is extremely hard, unless it is really obvious, but the industry is getting much more clever. So there are not that many obvious situations right now. And then is where betting side actually comes to the place. We at Odin GG, as I mentioned, and this is a similar situation with Sportradar, but unless my predecessors, I guess Grid doesn't have this kind of services because they don't see the bet slips, and Baze has these services only through radar, so they do not have it directly. We have it in-house. So we are providing our clients the odds, but at the same time, we are seeing the bets. So we are able, for risk management, identify the match fixing. And this way we escalated through ETAC and through other partners already a couple of situations that happened. We provided the clear evidence, also the gameplay, also the incoming bets. And one tricky part is that depending on the jurisdiction that your bookmaker or partner in general operates in, they can share with you a certain data or they can't. So some of the situation didn't end up very well because we were not able to get the data. Some of them are still in progress and are doing quite well. With this being said, when you look at this side, and one of those questions was already raised. For the content side, Riot, PGL, ESL, they might not be necessarily interested in the betting on their tournaments. This is additional revenue stream for them, but they might not be motivated necessarily, and this is the situation with Valve, actually. On the betting side, no one can actually prohibit you from providing the lines to a certain match. So this is a sort of way where one can rely on the other, but at the same time, they are not necessarily dependent on each other. At the same time, the best way is to cooperate because content side is not able to identify match fixing, while betting side, of course, wants to maintain a certain level of margin, and match fixing is hurting that margin. So for both parts to actually cooperate and operate together is beneficial for both. Nevertheless, critical part is that there are only two touch points where you can actually identify the integrity concerns. One is the tournament level itself when it comes to cheating, doping, and other stuff. And the other one is through bet slips. There is no other way or no other touch points where you can actually identify this to a certain level of certainty. With this being said, if we put the integrity in the middle of the discussions, and integrity meaning protecting the bettors, then it is extremely important to not misinterpret integrity of the data, which means the data is flawless, even though we've seen many times that even the server data can actually have multiple flaws. For example, switching the team A with the team B of a certain tournament. With integrity of the game. Integrity of game is much more important for the flourish of esports in a sense, and also for protecting all the parties involved. Also, when it comes to the tournament organizers, if they provide the official data, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a certain integrity processes in place. We've seen that many times. And on the contrary, we are aware of a couple of leagues, tournaments, where integrity standards are set very high, but at the same time, the data is not available to anybody at the moment. And for the foreseeable future will not be. This is, for example, two top League of Legends leagues. They are not available to anybody on the market. Everybody is looking at the public stream. And for the foreseeable future, this will remain the same. Also, when we are speaking about official data, this is, and trust me, we are at Odin's side, so we are creating the lines. Official data are something that we are all the time interested in, but at the same time, it is not something that protects the bettors. This is something that protects our margin on the betting side. This is what protects us. This is what protects bookmakers. This is what protects platforms through revenue share. But this is not something that protects the bettors. So I would say, if we are looking at the integrity from the perspective of bettors, punters, then this is not a critical question. Then by this, again, I wanted rather to have a flash discussion. So this is all from me, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. For the record, Chairman Paul Hamilton. Does anyone on that committee have any questions or discussion points?
Brett Abarbanel for the record. Hi, Merrick. Good to see you. Thank you for your presentation. My question, I was going to wait to see if there were others, and we had a pause. It ties to other uses of the data that you have. You talked about how you get the bet slips in. Is that in terms of individual bet slips, or do you just get a general volume or betting volume report?
This is anonymized, so we don't want to cross any GDPR lines or any such a thing. So for us, this is individual bet slip, but anonymized. So we don't know who the bettor is. We have just some random number that is assigned to him, but that's it.
Okay, and the betting operator has that. They create the hash or whatever it is for that ID. Okay.
Exactly. When it comes to, sorry, I'll just add. So when it comes to KYC, when it comes to deposits, withdrawals, this is all with the bookmaker. We are just seeing the activity as in terms of the individual bets, which is fully anonymized through hashtag, as you mentioned.
Okay. Well, as you are the data company that has been assigned the presentation to us on betting lines, you're going to be the recipient of my question on responsible gambling. Since you've mentioned and Baze mentioned as well, 70 to 80% of betting on esports is live or in-play betting, as we might call it here in the US. I'm going to be an obnoxious academic and say, well, research has shown that the relationship between in-play betting and gambling problems is much higher than the relationship between problem gambling and many other forms of wagering. Is there something that you do or that you perhaps work with gambling operators to do with those anonymized betting slips as perhaps part of this risk management that could help bolster some of the responsible gambling efforts that for many years the gambling world has really struggled with? And in this digital space, I think there's a lot of opportunity to do things better for those who are placing wagers. Is that something that Odin has done? And if so, how does that work?
Unfortunately not, because we can't do that. Responsible gambling is all tied to the income of the particular person, right? And this is sensitive information. So even though we see a volume of a certain bettor, and we don't know who that is, we don't even know his income. So we don't have any capabilities, of course, to understand whether this is something that can be actually problematic or is not at all problematic because the guy is millionaire, right? At the same time, because we operate with licensed operators, as I mentioned, licensed in Spain, in Peru, in Poland, in Czech Republic and Slovakia, then this is something that, based on the regulation in the particular jurisdictions, our clients need to be obliged.
Thank you. And please reach out. I don't know if I'm allowed to say to my place of work. Is this permitted? Yeah. Excellent. Please reach out to UNLV International Gaming Institute. We'd be quite interested in, and again, this is Bretta Barbanel for the record, in engaging in this discussion with you. There are a lot of complexities around the subject, and I think there's some very interesting ways that a data company like yours can contribute to, I'll go very generally here, improving the betting world we live in. So thank you.
We would love to, definitely.
Seth Shore for the record. Thanks, guys, for staying up past midnight. I think you win a prize. So I believe you said that you have been working in New Jersey. You got licensed in New Jersey. You're working with Esports Entertainment Group in New Jersey. Can you share how that experience has been, both from a regulatory onboarding perspective and now that you've been in the market for some time? If you can give us any insights, I think that'd be helpful. Thank you.
On the regulatory side, Vlasta, I guess this will be mostly on you, right? Because you run the process. You are probably muted.
Seth Shore for the record. I suppose I was asking if the process to get licensed in New Jersey was one that was efficient. If there was anything you can elaborate on that we can learn from here in Nevada. And the second question was more of a commercial question. How has the betting activity been in New Jersey since going live with Esports Entertainment Group?
There's something we lost as mic, I guess. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start with the commercial one, and if Vlasta is able to join us, he will continue with the regulatory one. So commercially wise, I would say that the market is still at a very, very early stage. So we are seeing pickup, but at the same time, this is not something that we are experiencing in Europe, where we have the operators that were able to double their book within a year, without much of the effort when it comes to marketing and other things. So definitely there is I would say a longer journey when it comes to esports in the US. Also, I guess some of it is related to the illegal betting that is happening in US. When I was NAGA, one of the regulators mentioned that 50% of the searches in Florida for betting is basically Bovada. So I'm quite pragmatic, and I expect that there's already a group of people that are actually betting on esports, but because they are used to a certain bookmakers, they are doing it with those bookmakers. And the challenge is for us, you, bookmakers, legal bookmakers and others, and of course the lawmakers as well, will be to put together a framework within which the legal esports betting will be feasible. So in essential, these books hopefully will start losing their market share. Vlasto, are you with us? Unfortunately not, I guess. So on the regulatory side, it was new to us. So most probably, I would say that when it comes to the onboarding process, many of the things we have learned. So, for example, we were probably the only one that liberally gave away our fingerprints at Czech police station. Nobody actually ever came to do that. So we learned a lot. We were helped by the right people. The process took probably 2 to 3 months, if I recall correctly. And at the end, everything went relatively smoothly. Of course, we expect that other jurisdictions, we will be much better prepared ourselves. There were some of the situations where the requirements were not too specific. So we lost a couple of weeks, for example, by providing our tax reports in original language, in Czech language. Whereas if we learned that this was supposed to be in English, we would probably save ourselves a month. But this was probably one of the very few bumps on that road of being actually live with New Jersey.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seth Shore for the record. One more question.
Go ahead.
So in my experience with setting odds, of course, it's important for the bookmaker to have great traders who can make great predictions and, present odds that are both attractive, but also allow them to keep a margin, of course.
Mm-hmm.
As we're trying to create a market for esports, have you found working with any of the operators are willing to be more aggressive with their odds, that are looking to perhaps present more attractive lines in the early days? Are they working with you, looking at lines as much as a marketing tool as anything else?
Absolutely. This is part of the angle, a couple of them. There were bookmakers, they were looking, in essential, we are looking at all around from 5 to 10% when it comes to esports. And out of 8% over round, we are able to generate something like 7.2% margin for our partners. With that being said, of course, the partners can work around it. And there was one part, probably I wouldn't mention the name, but there was one particular client that competed with, or still competes, with one of the largest bookmakers globally. And on their local market, they decided to cut the overround to 5 or 6%. So of course, the overround in terms of being competitive of the market is one of the things that, from the marketing perspective, bookmakers are looking at as well. But at the same time, they will probably not go to something like 2 to 3% overround, because then the margin might be too low to justify also the potential additional marketing expense. What we are seeing, though, is that many of the bookmakers decide the strategy that when this is a big tournament, they are going lower with the overround, and when this is just some very shady, problematic Southeast Asia Dota 2 tournament, then they are probably going with the overround even to 10 or 12%. So there is a way how you can work not only with the margin in general, but also for pre-match, live, specific markets, specific tournaments, to attract a certain volume for a certain tournaments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chairman Paul Hamilton for the record, if there's no other comments, thank you. Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Deputy Chief Marusic, please read in item number 6.
Item number 6 is presentation of Eric Bowers, Vice President of Architecture and Innovation for Boyd Gaming Corporation, relating to a forthcoming betting platform proposal related to esports wagering.
Welcome. Please
Thank
state
you,
your name
guys.
for the record.
Eric Bowers.
Thank you.
Thank you again for having me up here. I was up here briefly previously. I'm going to keep the, first of all, are you okay with the presentation? All right. We're going to keep it at a little bit of a high level, just because there's some things that we're working on that not that they're not appropriate for public. We just want to kind of keep it a little bit to ourselves now while we figure some things out. But as I mentioned before, we are strongly exploring, being a leader here in Nevada with the expansion of esports. There are a lot of things that, even though I mentioned before, we may launch it under a different brand, there are a lot of things that we think we draw in parallel from an architectural perspective from what we're doing with our current racing sports. That being said, it may not launched on racing sports. So today I'll talk a little bit about just kind of our approach, and a little bit about our architecture of what we kind of envision, riding a lot actually along the lines of the theme of today, which is data integrity and official data. So you'll see that peppered throughout here. So accuracy, integrity, that's really our focus. And what I want to talk about is what our objectives are for launch, right? Our objectives for getting into this space. We want to have access to some of the largest catalogs of server data that will be available that are available in esports today. And that includes a lot of the major titles. We'd like access to official data from about 90% of the tier 1 esports events. Our solution is going to need to be modular from an architecture perspective. Modular meaning that we componentize the platform, the data, and the trading components, and I'll show that in a second. And of course, I mentioned in-play wagering and pari-mutuel wagering are, to us, key operator capabilities that we would need if we were to launch. Focus is going to be mobile first, HTML5 or pixel stream platform, depending on the technology and the partner that we go with there from our app development perspective. And then integration, of course, with a lot of our current capabilities is key to any sports book vertical that we launch, which would include integration with our current player accounting system, player tracking system, loyalty, integrating those components in loyalty where any play that you do, any spend that you have there, you gain traction, loyalty system credits, tier credits, points, that kind of thing. And then integration with our cashless environment as well, because our cashless environment is designed. We were one of the first we were the first in Nevada to launch cashless to the brick and mortar game. That same wallet will need to tie into our architecture for spend on the wagering accounts associated with esports as well. And then of course compliance. One of the things that we talk about internally a lot, and this, with our senior leadership, is about foundation for legitimacy. I think that's kind of the theme of everything that we're talking about here. I'm not going to go through every bullet here, but one of the things that we focus on, and we talk a little bit about it, is sanctioned events. So we're very much about focusing on sanctioned events. We're very much focused on whitelisted events and that kind of thing, so that we can get kind of an acceleration throughout the season without having to come back to the board or the committee for approvals. One of the things around unsanctioned events, we talked a little bit about the relationship between operator and the rights holder or the publisher. I think we believe that there is a legitimate relationship that can happen between those two. It doesn't necessarily equate to the actual data translation or the data integration piece. There's a marketing and a cross-industry relationship, I think, that's important between the operator and especially larger game publishers from a marketing perspective even, right? So I think that cross-industry support is important. And then of course verifiable and accurate information. We talked today a lot about the real-time, the value of real-time information, and I can't emphasize enough, of course, as an operator, we are very much supportive of that real-time feed. So, and then we talk about being responsible with the data. again, utilizing official server data. We talked a little bit about responsible gaming itself. One of the things that we focus on when we model it off of some of our iGaming platforms and our race and sports is having that control of responsible gaming within the app tier itself, right? And so yes, we can do a lot of data integrity and stuff, but we can also control some of that player investment either through self-exclusion or self-limitation capabilities within the app itself, especially when we're dealing with electronic cash. So that's one of the areas that we want to focus on. Go ahead. So very high level, again, very high level, and we kind of genericize some of the boxes here, and you can probably imagine some of the folks we're talking to in those boxes. But really, six kind of focal points with our strategy and architecture. Obviously launching esports wagering app, both from app perspective, so mobile perspective, and a website perspective. We are kind of focused on mobile first, though, just because the tie-in with a lot of our race and sports customers and our iGaming customers. And I think I mentioned a little bit about this being a launch pad for customer acquisition into those core areas as well. So even though this may be launched as kind of a standalone app, it's very much tied to customer acquisition and conversion to our core online product space. Again, calendar of whitelisted approved events, very much supportive of that. That's going to be critical to us, even if it's done on an annual basis, and we need to approach the committee on an annual basis to clear that up. But that's going to be critical for us to keep momentum throughout the year, and keep momentum from a 24/7, right? 24/7 online. That is our goal. And so having that pathway cleared to keep some of that constant for the person that wants to wager at 2 a.m. on an event in Asia, then go ahead, join our app. So bi-directional loyalty, cashless integration, we talked a lot about that, very critical to us. That's how we tie our customers to our systems, and cross-sell and upsell our systems, our customers across our different online tools. Pre-match in-play odds and events using official data. We do have a perspective. Work closely with our VP of Race and Sports, and in our traditional sports world, we do accept multiple data feeds. Now there's a primary data feed for a lot of our odds making, but we'll accept a secondary feed for pre-match wagering that allows our in-house staff to do some integrity checking on their own, right? We'll probably rely a lot more on the trading engine partner to do the integrity checking in this world, because the data is coming in so fast. So Sport Radars of the world, we'll probably look at them as a primary partner on integrity. But there's also, at least in the pre-match, there's also a desire for our in-house quote integrity checking process, traditional race and sports process, to be able to validate from a data accuracy perspective, not so much from we kind of joke about it. We don't necessarily have a traditional race and sports staff that knows like whether 10 headshot kills is accurate in a minute or not. They do know if 2 touchdowns in 10 minutes is accurate, but not necessarily some of that stuff. So some of those finer points are going to need to be, we're going to need to rely on third-party partners for that. But from a data feed perspective, and you'll see at the end of the deck here, there's a few things that we're asking for from the committee, and one of them is the ability to, if available and if appropriate, bring in multiple data feeds, potentially for the same event, depending on the size of it. So from an architecture perspective, this is very high level, and again, I don't think this is anything new really to anybody in this room, especially the data providers. But again, talking about having multiple data suppliers, we understand that there's some leagues, at least in this particular case, that are tied to a particular provider, and then other providers are a little more broad with the titles that they support. So we want that flexibility kind of mix and match from an architectural perspective, and hence use multiple trading engines, or what we term as trading engines, or that's really the risk, the risk creators and that kind of thing, sport raters of the world, being able to use multiple engines there. And then from our perspective, we will take a SaaS approach. We will not necessarily host the app platform ourselves. We're looking for a partner to do that. It's similar to the model that we do with FanDuel and IGT, similar to what we did with Miomni, as well. So that model works for us. And then of course, in our cloud, or in our domain, we'll be presenting the web app front end itself, whether it's on a portal on your device, or whether it's a website. It will integrate our digital wallet. Our cashless environment sits in our own domain as well, so that will integrate. So it'll cross. We'll do a private links between clouds for integrity and security. And then of course our loyalty programs also sit within our domain as well. So those three areas will integrate across cloud to the SaaS provider for that type of more hyper personalization and integration into our own environments. That's kind of a very high level perspective. Again, following when I say that the model of that we have with FanDuel and IGT, this follows that model kind of well there. Go ahead. And then of course, like I said, content for us is key in the ability to have various contents. The way we look at it, at a very high level operator perspective, we're excited about the in-play options where we can have granular data points. We look for guidance, from the community, from the data providers to understand how to digest that and use the specific points that are actually good selling points to potential bettors, right? So we're going to look, even though we could probably get 100 points on one match, we're going to need to focus on, a dozen or so when it comes to in-play, because, oversaturation of prop betting, in-play betting will be as much of a hindrance as it would help. So we need focus and guidance on where we go there. Go ahead. We've been talking to some folks about the visualization and the customer experience and that kind of thing. Some of the things that we're gonna want are customized scoreboard widgets, so people can kind of personalize their experience. Of course, we talked about tying it into boards program and the cashless integration as well. Animated visualization, the real-time streaming, the ability to bring in our branding into the game. Those are some key aspects that are going to be important to us, and I think they're viable, and I think they're doable with the right platform. And so we're pretty excited about that. Go ahead. And then rapid wager customer experience. I mean, someone had mentioned earlier about the use of visualization for rapid wagering versus data, and that's kind of our same concept too. It's the more you can visualize, the faster you can do that. Based on what we've seen in our customers, the faster they can digest that information to do some rapid or increase the volume of in-play wagering. Go ahead. And then parimutuel is one thing that we think we understand that's available through certain platforms. Our sportsbook love parimutuel setups in any sports vertical, because it's low risk. You take a rake, and quite frankly, most of the time it really works out for the operator. One of the things here is how we address parimutuel marketing in the esports space, because it's probably not most familiar to most of the esports players. So, but for us, it's a great setup. So that's something else we're looking for in the platform. Go ahead. And then finally, just regulatory considerations, some things that we're looking for. Like I mentioned, can't mention it enough. We really need in-play and parimutuel as part of the, if that becomes part of the amendment, or however that's written in the regs. I mentioned a little bit about really, we just went through this with actually traditional racing sports with some reg adjustments in a different state where we were talking about no mandate that limits a single data provider for an operator to use in a particular league. Now, for instance, the NFL, uses BetGenius now, right? BetGenius is the sole provider for the NFL data, and it is only one provider, but there's no regulation that says operators need to use that one. So even though there's only one, and I'm not saying we wouldn't only use one, but we just can't have that mandate that we have to use one. Responsible gaming requirements, some of the things I talked about earlier about being able to control some of those self-exclusion, self-limitations within the app, and within the upper layer of the system that actually is customer facing. If we could mirror some the traditional racing sports models there from a responsible gaming perspective, that would be helpful for us because we have experience there, and quite frankly, I think it works. It works for these models well. And then from a field trial perspective, we can work this as if it becomes reality. Volume requirements are always up for question in any. I remember when we did the Miami race and sports mobile app here a number of years ago, and there were some challenges in balancing volume. As much as you believe in the product, sometimes just getting people to, when you first do the field trials is always a challenge. So, those are just some areas that I think, we would like to have some consideration when we build a regulation. That's about it. Sorry, it's real quick, but I wanted to get in front of you guys. Any questions?
Seth Shore for the record. At this point, we like quick.
I know.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear how operators in Europe, Bet365 and others are embracing esports. It's great to hear from our third-party data providers that operators want them and love them.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I just can't tell you how important it is to hear from a Nevada licensed operator, what you want. The good news is I'm hearing you want esports, right? I don't want to take that for granted. I think we'd all be wasting a lot of our time if that wasn't the case. And I am hearing that you see value in these third-party operators. So I'm really glad that we took time to learn about them. Personally, while today has very much been focused on technology, I'm an advocate that we have to think about marketing. It's one thing to have all of the technological platforms and regulations all tied up, but marketing's the tricky part.
Yeah.
I love what you said, that the relationship with the publisher, forget about whether that helps from a data accuracy perspective or from a marketing perspective.
Right.
In my opinion, the sportsbook operator X that's working with major game publisher Y and streaming a Masters on Twitch, they crush it.
Right.
Right. From a marketing perspective, that's how you build an audience and drive meaningful revenue. So I like that. I'm glad we put that on record. I just want to thank you, and I think it's really helpful to see that an operator like Boyd has such a thoughtful strategy. Obviously, you've put a lot of time in this, so I appreciate seeing that strategy, and it just gives me great comfort that we're all here for a reason.
Yep.
So thank you.
I appreciate it.
Che Chow for the record here. Thank you for your time. Just had a couple comments. One is you mentioned that in your request, in your last slide, you said that no mandate that limits official league data to one single source. There will be instances where publishers like Riot will give exclusive data rights to one source. And I think in that instance, let's say with the League of Legends, I assume that's something that we'll just all have to live with.
Yeah. And again, it was focused from the NGCB perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The NGCB doesn't mandate it, even though in the end there may only be one source.
I see.
Just from a technical
All right. So it's not like the board is saying we're going to choose one source. Like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then it's just kind of being, I'm not as much of an expert as you guys are on the actual rules around gaming in Nevada, but can you help me understand when you say gaming requirements mirror traditional R&S? Like, can you give me just some highlights for what that means?
So as an example, in our app, like for instance, if a person wants to transfer a certain amount of funds electronically from an outside source into the app to wager in, the app itself will actually track that on a daily basis and align with, because a person actually from a self-exclusion perspective or a self-limitation perspective, they should have the right. I know it's like spilling a cup of hot coffee from McDonald's on your lap, but literally we have to care for the customer that says, hey, if I don't put limitations on myself, if I don't have that capability, I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to blame the operator, right? And so from the app perspective, we have a capabilities to say, hey, look, you know what? From a 24-hour perspective, you've already transferred in $2,500 or $5,000, whatever the limitation is, and the app won't let that happen anymore, right? So those are the kind of responsible capabilities that you see on the race and sports side, where you're able to put electronic stipulations into the app or into the process of getting money to wager with, that we would use for esports as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Greta Barbanel for the record. Hi, Eric. It's lovely to see you again.
Yes,
Thanks for showing up and supporting this committee.
Thank you. Absolutely.
My question actually stems right off of Shay's question here. At the beginning, you kind of made an offhand comment about this being similar to race and sports, and then you said, this may not be under race and sports at all.
Right.
And so I was very excited to ask you questions about Reg 22, which for those of you who aren't listening, this is the regulation that covers race and sports in Nevada. And then your entire presentation was about how this fits into race and sports. So my question for you is, it's a little bit twofold.
Is what the heck you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, the first one is sort of what the heck are you talking about,
Yeah.
right? How do you envision that? My best guess is that it was related to the transition for customer acquisition and transition to iGaming. But my follow-up, because this is something that the committee has not quite been charged with, but it's been one of the overarching questions since before its formation, which is, does esports fit under Reg 22? Should it be considered in the same way that we treat race and sports in Nevada? So I'm curious, one, what the heck were you talking about? But two, as an operator, how do you envision esports? Do you see it as fitting underneath Reg 22, or do you see it as needing a unique set of regulation?
So I see it, or I'm sorry, us as an operator, we see it as fitting under Reg 22 from a regulation perspective. From a marketing, branding, and launch perspective, it may be its own animal. So in other words, if we say, hey, we have Boyd Sports, and when our customer looks at Boyd Sports, it says, yeah, you know what? I know Boyd Sports. I can get the traditional stuff. I know, I can get basketballs. I can get, and we have one of the larger catalogs of sports online that people can wager on. I mentioned this before too. Esports will get lost in that. Esports, because from a customer experience perspective, it is a different experience, right? And so cataloging it and branding it under even a different app launch perspective would that's what gives it justice, if you will, right? It's very few apps have live streaming, right? Well, esports is all about live streaming, right? Very few apps have a demographic in traditional race and sports have a demographic that we're going to target with esports. Now there'll be some crossover, don't get me wrong, but unless it's more visible to the customer as its own animal, we don't think it'll do it justice for a launch here. And I think, looking at how it's playing out in New Jersey, and I think Colorado's got a little bit of it as well. If you don't separate out and segment that out from a marketing hence the technology perspective, and app perspective, it's not going to get the visibility that it needs to be successful. And I think, if you look at Europe and Asia, I think you see a little bit more of that where it kind of stands out on its own. So if we can have the best of both worlds, that would be great. Put it under Reg 22, but maybe from a technical perspective, we'll launch it, in its own space.
Brett Abarbanel for the record. Thank you so much. Well detailed there. And I also wanted to say thank you for including responsible gambling in your presentation. It's always really nice to see operators incorporate that, not just as a side mention, but as one of the core parts of your ask even of how this regulation will look. So
absolutely.
Well done. Thanks, Eric.
Sure.
Hi, Robbie Forbes to the record. Just a quick question. You mentioned the whitelisting or sanctioning process. What's from an operational perspective, what's the lead time or cadence by which you would need that sort of actually make it a productive exercise?
Once we have the technology in place, and again, talking to some of our potential platform providers, we don't need a lot of lead time. We don't need over a quarter of lead time. Right. And so, in other words, if we were able to say, hey, you know what, in fourth quarter of the beginning of fourth quarter of the previous year, if we're able to get those approvals, I think that sets us up both from a technology perspective and getting those whitelists, cleared with our platforms, as well as from a marketing perspective. We can plan out our marketing materials, both digital and physical materials for that. So I would say the 2 to 3 months would be a good lead time for that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm Che Chow for the record. Eric, you mentioned, you showed your schematic, just getting some clarity. So you are also saying that the data that you will need to operate this will have to come from a grid or a Baze or a data company that has rights from a publisher. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's who we like to focus on and partner with as well, or at least have that relationship, even though it's a trading engine. But yes, we absolutely are going to focus on folks like that. Yes.
Thank you.
Judd Hannigan for the record. Eric, thank you very much for being with us today. Again, this is kind of a little bit aligned with Che's question as well. But we heard a lot about data, right, from a lot of really strong data providers and operators in the space today. I have a question. It goes along to your last slide where you say that hey, no mandate that limits official league data to a single source. As we think about how to make recommendations about where to draw lines and to create something that's sustainable for Nevada in its regulatory framework around esports betting, what is your opinion on that being limited to official data, right? When I say that, in-play betting, which has the highest demand in anything regarding esports betting, clearly off the charts. I think there's a general need for official data to make that relevant and to have a high level of integrity. But when it comes to pre-match betting, what's your thoughts on that, and how does that align with your statement on the last slide when it comes to do you need official data? An official data partner? Should we be thinking around just having an official data partner for all offerings, or just limited to certain offerings?
So right now, and again, we're partnering with all you folks to kind of weave through this path, and so obviously guidance comes in. Right now, though, if when working with our VP of Racing Sports and talking about that and how things happen from the traditional racing sports side, we're saying for in-play and pari-mutuel, it should be nothing but official data. That's our stance right now. For pre-match, our vision is that we use official data to set the odds, and if there are options that look like legitimate options that aren't necessarily official data, for us to do some pre-match checking on our own, we would accept. Ideally, everything is official data. Even the secondary or tertiary feeds that we get for our own sanity checking would be official data, and that's an ideal world. But if our race and sports team says, look, I don't know a lot about this sport, but I need some feed, and there is no secondary feed that's official data, we would be open to taking in pre-match data only if it's unofficial. But that's for our own, that comes into our own accountability, right? Our own accountability, just to double check our official data. But in the perfect world, we would like everything to be official and have options, at least to get secondary feeds that are also official data. I know we can't do that with league. Got it. Understand. I mean, there's going to be some esports titles that we just can't do that with. But in other esports titles that maybe have a crossover, transparently crossover between base and grid, we would probably take both of those feeds if they were both official. One being a sanity check and one being the primary risk setting for feed, if you will. Does that answer your question? So in play and Bear Mutual, absolutely only official.
Yeah, it does. And this is Judd Hannigan again for the record. One other thought is, again, thinking about official publishers, you mentioned league, but in a case of, say, Counter-Strike, where it's a bit of a hodgepodge, right, where that official data lies in the hands of the tournament organizers,
Right.
do you classify official data coming from either tournament organizers or potentially some of the data partners we've heard from today who've logged that data because they've worked with those tournament organizers in some capacity?
Right now, and again, we're working through educating ourselves on all of this as we go through the process. But right now, for our stance would be, if I can't get official data from, say, for instance, the couple of the partners that we heard from today, we won't go down that title. We have to be, the risk management to us, the risk mitigation to us is more important than expanding out multiple titles. Right now, there's a focus on 5 or 6 titles that we would be going for launch, right? 5 or 6 major titles where we can get the most volume from our customers and that kind of thing. So our stance right now, Judd, is if we can't get it from an official data provider, we're not going to take it for the risk setting, for the risk.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chair Hamilton, for the record, thank you, Eric. We appreciated that presentation. If there are no more comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Deputy Chief Marusic, please read in item number 7.
Item number 7 is discussion and possible action to formulate regulatory proposals related to ensuring the integrity of esports when wagers are placed on such competitions, and to draft potential regulations incorporating those proposals for regulatory action to be taken by the Nevada Gaming Control Board.
This item was placed on the agenda for the committee to discuss possible regulatory proposals for drafting and possible recommendation to the Nevada Gaming Control Board. Any I'm looking at you guys, you're fairly foggy, so I apologize if I'm not picking up any facial recognition, but do you guys feel like we are in a position to start having a discussion around this? Or I know, Seth, you had a pretty strong opinion on this.
Seth Stroh, for the record, I'm certain that we could start to have a good conversation, and I wouldn't be against that. However, I would make a recommendation to my fellow committee members and you, Chair Paul Hamilton, that perhaps we organize a follow-up meeting much sooner than the Q4 meeting that is on the calendar, perhaps in the next 4 weeks, allowing all of us to digest what we heard here today, coming to that meeting with maybe some more well thought out suggestions. So that would be my recommendation to the committee.
Che Chow, for the record, I also agree.
Robbie Forbes, for the record, I also agree.
Brett Barbanel for the record, and I'm going to further suggest that we recommend, if this is permitted, that the members of the committee review Regulation 22 prior to that meeting so that we can also discuss in part that same overarching question I posed to Mr. Bowers regarding whether or not esports fits underneath the existing regulation.
Judd Hannigan for the record. This all sounds great from my perspective. Having briefly gone through Reg 22 in passing, I think one of the things that we should be thinking about when reading it and potentially as an agenda item is how we define professional versus amateur. I think traditional sports has looked at defining it as professional, but then brought in governing bodies and also led into collegiate. And there's some items in there that point to that. Esports is not as clean cut. There are tiers in some esports as how things are divided apart, and I think we could potentially look to other regions of the world that are doing this already to see how what levels of play that they're currently accepting wagers on. But I think it's a topic for us to consider in the next dialogue.
Chair Hamilton, for the record, I agree with each of you. I feel like today was insightful and probably what we needed to start having the beginning of that same conversation. In addition, I also would not like to wait as long as we were forced to wait this time. That being said, I think it'd be difficult to get a date picked out in the current format, but I would say that if Deputy Chief Marusic is willing and able, if she could help us get a meeting on the books, I'd be happy for us to reconvene in a month and start to have a deeper dialogue on this.
DC Marusic, for the record, I'd be happy to help.
Thank you. Anything else for item 7? All right. Seth looks like he's smiling. It's far away though. Next on our agenda is my report as chair of the committee. And for that, Deputy Chief Marusic, can you refresh my memory on the date? The only thing I had was actually calendaring our date for October for our next formal board meeting, but we've all agreed we'll have a meeting in the meantime. I just don't have the date in front of me. I apologize.
Definitely. We were looking at October 24th at 10 a.m.
Do we need a vote on that?
I believe I gained consensus through everybody by email, so I think we're good to go if that's acceptable to you.
It is. Thank you so much. Deputy Chief Marusic, this brings us to our last agenda item, public comment.
This item is placed on the agenda to give public an opportunity to comment on ETAC related matters.
Anyone wishing to make a public comment, please step forward to the podium. We'll start with Carson City. Doesn't look like anyone is coming forward. Next, we will take public comment from Las Vegas. That will close our public comment section. This concludes the Esports Technical Advisory Committee meeting. We are adjourned. Thank you all.